If not for good sense, if not for God, then will you consider living for me?
Let's talk about Shogun episode 9 entitled Crimson Sky. Patrick Klepek, before we even get to this episode, I want to acknowledge a piece of feedback we got on last week's episode. Honestly, the YouTube comments are where we're getting a lot of reactions to our comments about Shogun. And Eric Lenzer on YouTube wrote in about this scene that happened last week in Shogun. Quote, did anyone else see Lady Ochiba kind of sighing when she was proposed to? To me, it felt like she realized that even with all her power as the heir's mother, she'll still be treated as an object. I also think she would not have agreed to marry Ishido, at least that's what it looks like, if Daioin hadn't urged her not to. The woman who used her as a surrogate in the worst way and who just told her, look at what I made, has one last wish. I am not shocked that Ochiba would do exactly the opposite, end quote. I thought that was a great observation. We talked a little bit about that scene last week. I should have talked about it more. But yes, Lady Daioin, who's like the Taiko's wife, I believe, right? She dies, and then she said one of her last words is, "A, don't marry Ishido. B, look at what I made. Like, look at this wonderful, child I've created." When it like was Lady Ochiba who went through apparently hell to create that child, and it therefore wouldn't be surprising if that actually spurred Ochiba to do what she ends up doing, which is unite with Ishido. And by the way, yes, I totally agree that Ochiba sighing when she's proposed to, she's not only sighing because she's treated like an object, she's sighing because she's like, I'm smarter than all these people. Like, why? This guy is completely unimpressive to me. Like there's tons of reasons for the sigh. But anyway, Patrick Klepek, any thoughts on that? I just wanted to bring that up before we get to this week's episode.
If anything, at the very least, it underscores the complexity of that character,
yes.
And especially like the place that women have in this society, the roles that they play, and the show builds her up like as I characterize her as sort of a final boss, but a final boss in a video game has ultimate power, and she may come across as and is like conniving and smart. And yet there are still limitations to what she is capable of doing and how she is perceived because of the circumstances around her. And I think that sigh is really emblematic of that.
Absolutely. Okay, Patrick Klepek, what did you think of Shogun Episode 9, The Abyss of Life?
What a great episode of television. So much happens in this episode. It's not the episode that I expected,
right,
especially given the title,
Crimson Sky,
right? Which based on based on how we have talked about Crimson Sky, the implications of what that might be, you see an episode called that and it's like giddy up. And this episode was giddy up in a different way, but like much more political intrigue. I mean, look, David's getting everything he wanted. Like people in rooms, shocking violence, then people in rooms. Like this episode is hitting the formula hard relative to what the title of the episode was. I don't know. My expectations were about to amp up the action. And not that there isn't action here, but the kind of action I was conceptualizing in my mind, larger scale, all out war. We'll see if we even get there. I continue to be surprised by the arcs of characters in this show, the story that it's telling, the scope of that storytelling. It just continues to get better. And so I echo your sadness at the fact that we only have one more of these. And the responsible thing to do is to not try and force a season 2 or anything out of something that is an adaptation of a book, but at the same time, the idea that all these characters, this world are about to go away is tough to wrestle with. But I think it speaks to how special the show is. And it's rare to get, you watch good shows, you watch great shows. Like it's not often that you watch shows like, oh, wow, I am in the, I'm watching a masterpiece. Like I'm watching a show people are going to have in all-time top 10 lists years from now, and it's cool to like recognize that you're in one of those moments and just let it wash over you episode after episode. And this is just another one of those. I'm just in the palm of this show's hand, and as sad as I am about like where some of these storylines end up, like I fully trust the storytellers, and I cannot wait to see where all the pieces end up.
I think the show Shogun does use its titles to great effect, and titling an episode like this Crimson Sky is a great way of not even just subverting expectations, but basically the show saying we like to do things differently around here, right?
Mhm.
Like you think Crimson Sky is going to be the big fight scene, blah blah blah. Have we been watching the same show? The show seems to be asking, right? I agree with you. This is one of the greatest TV episodes of all time, probably. Like it's up there. It's awesome. It's tremendous. I feel so glad to not only be able to watch this TV show, but also to be hosting a TV podcast with you, Patrick Klepek, that we get to like talk about it with thousands of people each week. It's truly a blessing. That's the kind of episode of TV it was. It's like, oh wow, I feel blessed that like we were
Mhm.
around when we didn't have to be born when we were born, you know. We didn't have to. Maybe we could have been born when we were like we could have been born three years ago, and we couldn't even comprehend what was going on FX's Shogun. So the fact that we're around is awesome. It's a great episode of TV. Let's talk about what actually goes on in the show. We begin with a flashback to the Shonai region 14 years ago. A pregnant Mariko is wandering through the snow trying to kill herself, even though her husband has prevented her from dying. The priest Alvito meets with Mariko and teaches her the ways of Christ for the first time, saying that he believes God has kept them alive for a purpose. I'm digging these cold opens, Patrick Klepek. We get like a lot of the cold opens have flashbacks. I'm digging them.
Mhm.
They're kind of cool. It shows like, hey, all these characters have like a long history. They weren't always just the characters you see before you on screen. Any thoughts on the flashback before we move on?
No, I just like it as a narrative device. I feel like establishing it here in the cold open is a fun way of allowing them to play with the timeline, to like go to different points of history without interrupting the flow of the actual narrative. And not that you can't intertwine those things, but I think the way they've chosen to do it, it lets the present storyline continue its momentum without having to account for, all right, now how do we reestablish the tension that we just had in the previous scene, because now we've gone to the and so again, there's ways of doing that. Plenty of shows have, but I like the way they've ended up here, and they're also just very careful about it. Like that when we're getting a blast from the past, like it means something. Like it's not something that is used to just fill backstory or fill time. It's like, hey, this is important to these characters right now. That's why we're showing you a glimpse of characters who have extremely rich past that mostly we're filling in the blanks of on our own or inferring. And so the rare time that we actually get to see it feels special.
Mariko and Blackthorn and Yabushige are all in the present day on the ship. They arrive at Osaka. There are many interactions leading up to the event. The main event, when Toranaga's people will appear before Ishido. For instance, Yabushige and Blackthorn meet. They rehearse how to bow to their enemies. Lord Kiyama and Blackthorn meet, and it's tense because they have some religious differences between them. So there's all these little interactions. But finally, the meeting happens. It's Lady Ochiba, the heir, and Ishido. They're all there. Yabushige surrenders to the council on Toranaga's behalf and offers condolences for the Taiko's wife. He offers his loyalty to Ishido and says Blackthorn is loyal to him, and they're a package deal. But Ishido says that the heir has no interest in the barbarian. It doesn't go well. Yabushige's plan, shockingly, doesn't go according to plan. It's really a big surprise, but that's where we are. Mariko enters. I gotta say, this has been a great episode for Mariko entering rooms and doors, and whenever like Mariko and doors. This is like a big episode for Mariko standing next to, near, or behind doors.
Next to, opening, closing. More dramatic things happening to doors later in the episode.
like it sounds like I'm being sarcastic, but like literally every time Mariko is behind a door and like the door opens, I'm like, oh my gosh, like something cool is about to happen. Like that's literally how I'm watching the show, right? So I'm being like genuine, even though there are a lot of doors going on. Anyway, Lady Ochiba mentions that in Lady Daiuin's memory, there's going to be a poetry competition. She asks Mariko to choose a first line. Mariko obliges, reciting this poem: while the snow remains veiled in the haze of the cold morning, a leafless branch. Very sad, very bleak. Mariko then explains that she's leaving Osaka with some of Toranaga's people to meet Toranaga. Ishido is holding everyone hostage, but it's super important that no one knows that publicly, or else people would get pretty upset. So after some extremely tense back and forth, Lady Mariko declares she's going to be trying to leave tomorrow anyway. It quickly becomes clear that Mariko is trying to put the regents in an impossible situation. Letting Mariko leave would go against their interests, but so would forcing her to stay. So lots of people get pissed at Mariko. Yabushige chews out Mariko for hiding Toranaga's plan from him. Mariko also meets her son, who's really not happy about this whole situation, and says that if she's disgraced, that he says, quote, "I will no longer be your son." The plan reveals itself. It's not going to be necessarily a massive drag-out fight, although there is fighting, but it's mostly going to be a symbolic gesture of, hey, are you guys going to let me leave? That's the whole plan. That's what it all is going to come down to. So, next morning, Mariko attempts to leave Osaka Castle. She's stopped by Ishido's men who ask her for a permit. A massive fight ensues. Ishido has a shit ton of men, and Mariko eventually decides she cannot fight her way through them. So, because she's unable to accomplish her mission, she says she will take her own life at sunset, and she asks Lord Kiyama to be her second. All right. I thought
Ooh.
this scene was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, the fight was cool. It was super tense. It's not like a ton of action. And this is the thing. Is like a lot of Marvel movies, a lot of, big action movies. Like, we got to have like 50,000 faceless guys fight each other, fight against the superheroes. It's like, no, you can just have like 8 dudes fighting. And as long as you invest it with emotional stakes, it can be really effective. Patrick Klepek, any thought on this sequence of events?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously later in the sequence, Mariko is actually handed a weapon in his participant, but for large swaths of the sequence, she is just slowly walking forward while chaos ensues around her. And I think especially relative to, again, this is not a show with a ton of action sequences. I think the couple of times it's done more traditional action sequences, you and I have, that was fine, right? Like there's a fighting scene pretty early in the show. There's the boat scenes also pretty early in the show, and I was a little worried at I was like, this wasn't bad, but like it wasn't that good either. And it's like, that's fine. It would become clear is that's not what this show is. That's not what this story is. But part of what was, I think, remarkable about this sequence was, again, it's framing, right? It's like, you aren't looking. There's an action scene taking place around you.
Yes.
You aren't actually watching the action. That's part of the reason those other sequences didn't work as well. It's like, we're looking at the action because they're asking us to look at the action, judge the action. And if the action isn't good, the scene isn't good. And here, I'm not looking at how they're swinging the swords. I mean, I am, but I'm not, right? You are just watching Mariko and occasionally Anjin, like, barely keeping it together with these characters who are up in the periphery. And that is just, it's an all-time way to frame an action scene because they get to do it all. You have sick-looking action while also like the highest of emotional stakes.
Right.
And it's just masterful.
Yeah, and I think there was also, I gotta admit, there was like a good 3 seconds where I was like, is she gonna pull this off? Like, is she gonna kill like 18 dudes single-handed? And then no, she doesn't. And then she says, well, because I'm unable to accomplish my mission, I'm going to kill myself in disgrace. Ishido and the regents debate Mariko's fate. They've really put her in, she's really put them in a bind, because as Lady Ochiba says, if you let her die, there's going to be a revolt from every high family in Osaka. But if you let her leave, the hostages will also demand to leave. There is a scene where Anjin and Mariko are summoned to meet with the heir, but it's really just a way for Ochiba and Mariko to meet and chat. It's basically their way, like Ochiba is trying to be like, hey, can we, stop this madness? Is there a way for us to stop this madness? Like, Lady Ochiba and Mariko have long history, right? And so Lady Ochiba is basically trying to say, hey, is there a way we can resolve this without you killing yourself? Like, that would be great. I'm against your guy, but like, I would like for you not to die.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of refer to their history together and how Mariko was always like a goody two shoes, and that made her a really angry person who is now seeking destruction. I thought it was an awesome scene. Any thoughts on this Lady Ochiba and Mariko sequence, Patrick Klepek?
Well, just getting in the room I mean, that's part of what's really joyous and what generates so much tension in this episode is we've had characters geographically separated, in which we have learned a lot about their shared histories, why they're connected, why things are so tense, why it cannot probably be resolved with just a meeting. But the payoff here and what makes the show sing is that the payoff isn't the spectacular action sequence. The payoff is characters talking about each other, now being in a room with one another, and all the emotional payoff of just having them being able to look each other in the eye. And so we're getting that multiple times here. And I think that's a lot of the, ultimately, like a lot of what we're building towards, right? Is at some point we're going to have, Toranaga and Ichido like in a room. Like that's like a lot of the emotional arc. I hope. Yeah. But at least that's the, whether that specifically happens, those are the sorts of things you're like rooting for in the show, is to get these characters with history in a room together. And so all of that works phenomenally well.
There is a brief scene where Blackthorn tries to talk Mariko out of killing herself, which is kind of nice. And there's this tender moment where she kind of touches his hand, very like subtle touching in the show going on that means a lot of tenderness there. And there's also a scene where Mariko has a confession with Priest Alvito and they share a final moment together. Then it's the seppuku ceremony. Mariko is there to kill herself. She asks Lord Kiyama to come forward to second her. He doesn't show up. Pretty uncool, Patrick Klepek, gotta say.
I gotta say, you RSVP'd.
You RSVP'd to cut someone's head off. You better show up.
You nodded your head. I saw it. That is an RSVP in ancient Japan.
How awkward do you think it is, to not show up to someone's seppuku compared to like not showing up to someone's wedding? You know what I mean? Like,
well, what do you?
It's probably up there, right? Like,
at least Mariko had her pseudo boyfriend there to pick up the slack. But what does she do? I guess it's unclear to me. Can you commit the act without the second? And maybe that's the tension the scene.
You can, but I think it's just like it's like way worse because you died way slower.
Yeah.
But it's like if someone didn't show up to if they RSVP'd and didn't show up to your wedding, that would be like a relationship, and like not necessarily ender, but it would be.
I need a heads up and better have a good excuse.
Right. But I guess people's calculation is, well, what are they gonna do? What is this really gonna negatively impact the relationship? Like, what's gonna happen?
It's already pretty bad. Things are already pretty.
That's Lord Kiyama's rationale, I guess. But anyway, he's not there. Mariko removes her cross, and then Blackthorn says, quote, "I will do it. Hell is no place I haven't already known. Let it from your mind," end quote.
God damn that. Not a show that is about making you weep, but that's about as close as I got to being like, oh man.
But it's also, what a great moment, because it's Blackthorn, like, in a way, I think it's Blackthorn showing respect for Mariko. It's like yes. this whole show, he's like, don't kill yourself, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. Like he's just trying to be like, he's trying to like not have them do it the way they are supposed to do it, or they want to do it. And this is finally the scene where he's like, okay, I'm gonna do it the way that you want it to be done. It's him like conceding.
One worry I had, now granted that showed we're going a different direction, but we have not seen a lot of evidence of him swinging a sword. And I was like,
and yeah, you're like, is this going to take like, and yeah, I'm like, is this going to take like 8 cuts for him to?
I was like, come on, show, you're not going to like pull a Toranaga on me here, right? Are you?
I like how Toranaga is now synonym for needing to cut a guy's head off 8 times. But yes, that was a concern.
I was like,
okay, Blackthorn seems like a strong dude, and hopefully and yeah, until the last second, I think we all believed it could happen, right? Like,
well, it does the opposite of a similar sort of scene, right? With Toranaga and Hit, where it's like in this scene, they managed to pull away from it. Like there is sort of a last second, like, oh, this doesn't have to happen. But the fact that this happens in reverse, where we've already witnessed a scene where a character claims they're going to commit this act, and you're like, no, like they're not, no, like it's clearly someone will intervene at the last second, and they don't.
Yeah,
and so
right. Yeah,
it's incredibly smart storytelling, because it frames it sets the audience up to go, well, anything could happen.
Yeah,
sure,
we just saw Hiromatsu do the same thing. Like, right, now we're going to see Mariko, yeah, why not?
Right. And so they can really stretch it out like as far as possible, because you as the audience member just have to go, yeah, this is the kind of show where this could happen. And then obviously something else does.
Ishido intervenes at the last second, and Mariko like collapses out of from the anxiety, and I'm like, I had the same feeling. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I can't.
Thank God.
It's like, thank God. And he says that you're free to leave in the morning. Toranaga's retinue also asks to leave, and Ishido kind of brushes them off. He's like, no one's a hostage here. Just apply for the permit. Sheesh.
Just a form.
Don't bother me. Jeez, what do you think I'm holding you? What? Like, what? Get out of here. Get out of here, guy. Come on. That's not cool for you to come on. That's Ishido's whole deal. All right, anyway. So it seems like Mariko's out of the woods. Anyway, Blackthorn visits Mariko at night. They make love. I'm fine with it because at least Mariko got to have one nice night before something terrible happens, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But I also appreciated that, like, hey, probably Mariko is actually attracted to him because he did the thing that she wanted him to do. You know, he gave her respect.
It's not just respect. It was literally going to give her what her husband refused, right? Like it's yes, and it's for Blackthorn's character, it's a sort of a final acceptance of this element of the culture that he just cannot understand. So that's
right.
For him, that's kind of fulfilling a part of his arc. But for her, it's like she's got a lot of problems with her husband. Like there's a whole top 10 list of shitty things about him. But, top of that list is not showing her the respect that she feels she deserves by not taking her life. And the culmination of Mariko and Blackthorn's arc becomes, you showed me the respect that my husband never could. And this is what allows us to commit this act and finally be fully attracted to one another and express it. And I thought that was especially for where things end up in the episode, it makes it feels like closure for that character.
Yes, totally. Anyway, in the middle of the night, assassins come and start murdering everyone.
as is wont to happen.
As is wont to happen. It turns out Yabushige has betrayed them all to ally with Ishido. These are shinobi. And as somebody who played the Shinobi Genesis game, I don't know if you remember that. I was like,
oh yeah,
right, yeah. These are real. Those are real things. They're like real ninjas that come in and can actually are extremely effective. Every time there's been an assassin scene on Shogun, it's been incredible. Like I think it was in episode 2 or 3, right? There's that assassin that tries to kill Blackthorn, and it's incredibly effective. This one's also incredibly effective. So Yabushige, he does this thing where he opens the door for the assassins, then he pretends he's not with them, and then he's like, come on, let's all go. And then they all get herded into this storage closet. They're trying to figure out a way out, and Blackthorn still hey, let's push this huge, massive thing in front of the door. And Mariko, at some point, makes peace with the fact that she is going to die. And in fact, that she can still achieve what she was trying to by committing seppuku. Like, committing seppuku would have achieved Toranaga's ends. And she can now achieve it in a different way, which is standing in front of the door while there is explosives on it, declaring that she protests this disgraceful attack by Lord Ishido, and then she is blown the F up, and that's what happens at the end of the episode. It is shocking. I mean, there is something really kind of manipulative about the show where it's like, it makes you think that Mariko's going to kill herself, and then nope, she's not gonna. But then it's like, oh, she actually does anyway. I'm kind of like, if the show was not freaking brilliant in every other, not in every other, just in every conceivable way, I would might be annoyed by that. But I just kind of impressed. It's like, wow, what a head fake. I can't believe you convinced me she was safe. And now she's going to die. And the way it happened, the way it's shot and framed and edited, because she's interrupted mid-sentence by the explosion. And it's just really I can't believe it's happening. And, that is the end of that character. This character once said, we decide, we live and we die. We decide nothing else, basically. Right? And it's kind of this whole time she's been trying to exert control over when and how and for what purpose she dies. And it was nice that to some degree she still got to exert that control, even in spite of such a shocking attack. Patrick Klepek, thoughts on this closing scene?
Well, yeah, I think part of the issue that you're pulling at is in a show that is otherwise pretty slowly paced in a purposeful way to give everything time to breathe. Kind of the arc that Mariko goes on in this episode feels a little rushed, or at least it's fast, because
just between like her
Yes.
almost killing herself and then not, and then like
Yes.
killing herself again. That all happens in like 8 minutes, basically. Right.
Exactly. It all happens extremely fast, and I think when you juxtaposition that against how everything else is handled in the show, I think that's part of what you're getting at there.
Right.
But what I, in the same way that you mentioned, what I like about it is that, in some ways it fulfills. She has wanted to end her life because she sees really no purpose in it. And part of what Blackthorn is trying to get across to her is that, like, you can find a new purpose. Like, we can be that purpose, or you can find another purpose. And she managed, like, by, Blackthorn agreeing to end her life, and then her opening herself up to Blackthorn, and then being presented with this moment, she does fulfill what Blackthorn was hoping for her, which is like, she did find purpose, and she also did find someone that treated her with respect and as an equal, and it all happens extremely fast, but she ultimately gets kind of everything she wanted. It's not a happy ending in the way we would traditionally think about it, where her and Blackthorn go on a ship together or whatever, and go back to London.
They sail the 7 seas and go on adventures together, right? Yeah.
But in the context of what Mariko wanted for herself, it is a happy ending. It's with purpose and being treated with respect and being seen as a whole person. And I think that is
by Blackthorn. I don't know if she's treated with respect by the shinobi that blew her to bits, but
No, but I think
but she does find the purpose of, like, hey, this death can mean something.
She can't change society. I think, but relative to what the needle she can move, I think it makes sense for the arc of how she viewed her life, that she achieved purpose.
Agreed. I agree that ultimately at the end, like, she made her death mean something. I assume her death is going to have some impact in the next episode, right? It's not just going to be like a senseless death that is forgotten.
No.
And I gotta say, man, Anna Sawai brings it this episode. There is this scene when she's talking to Blackthorn's trying to, like, move this thing into, so they can, like, figure out a way to get out of the situation. And she says something like, let it happen, or let it come, right? And there's this moment where she kind of goes from being terrified and angry to, like, just being at peace. It's an amazing, subtle moment in the show, and beautifully done. So bravo, Anna Sawai. I don't think we're going to be seeing her in the show again, except maybe in a flashback,
Yeah.
But what a tremendous end to a really interesting character. And just an amazing end to a spectacular episode of television.
Agreed.
Any closing thoughts, Patrick Klepek? We good?
The last thing I would say is this show has done it again. I don't know what's going to happen next. And that's wild to be in that place this far. Like, we're literally knocking on the door of the end of this story, and it still feels like anything could happen. And I don't have because so many stories are working towards a thing, and you have a sense of what that thing is. And all I can imagine here is conflict, but I don't know how it all resolves or in what direction. And that is a compelling place to be as an audience member.
Well, I don't have any information. Like, I haven't read the book or anything. I haven't read anything about the future, so I'm just guessing. But I would assume that this will be catastrophic for Ishido. Like, what happens in this episode will be catastrophic for Ishido, and will ultimately lead to his and Lady Ochiba's downfall in some way. That's my guess.
Should have just let her go. Yes, I agree with you.
Should have just let her go. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.